some of this stuff really feels organic, that it just came at the right time. So, a lot of those partnerships grew up after the sort of financial crash in whenever it was, 2008-ish. But the world was becoming more digital, and partnerships were becoming more extensive. We were moving with our work into something new. We wanted to explore film and media more. So I think the big impact was that it really enabled us to do that, to explore a new area. It also brought lots of new funding opportunities, so we could work with more young people. It was exciting because we were able to reach young people we otherwise wouldn't have been able to, those with an interest in film and digital media. So that's how it impacted on us. With Adobe, we initially applied for funding for a smaller program. Adobe really liked our work, and they came to us and said, we're looking for a strategic partner, and would you apply? With the BFI, it was similar. There was an open call, and because we were doing some work with Adobe, I thought, yeah, we can do a whole filmmaking program. I know enough to write the funding application, and so that's how we launched our partnerships with the BFI. And in fact, the BFI were working quite closely with, or had worked previously with Adobe, and so there was already a little bit of partnership there, and so we built on that. And with Disney, we'd worked with Disney many years ago, whilst we were still in Hamilton House, so that must have been in the early 2002, 3, somewhere around there, with The Lion King. So it was the first time we'd worked with Disney, but then they contacted us. So that's how we got into that partnership.
And with Disney, they were bringing an American program to the UK for the first time. So in America, they have schools that put on short versions of the Disney musicals, and they've got little scripts for those productions. So they wanted to bring it to the UK. So, we really, again, the pioneering thing came back. We were trying that for the first time. With Adobe, that was quite an experience because, again, they had a network of digital creators across the US. So, we had access to all of those organisations. We were talking to them.
And worldwide, in fact.
And global, yes.
Many years later, on one of the last few projects we were working on, things like the BFI Film Academy, that it was still that same ethos and belief. And the young people would come in and they'd have meetings on this really fancy board table. And you could just see them like growing and swelling with pride because they were doing something where they were treated like adults. So throughout Eastside's history, when we were here and we were getting staff members in, we worked with people for whom Eastside was their very first job ever. And I think perhaps we saw ourselves a little in those people, and loads of them have gone on to do amazing things.
My name is Aki Schultz. I am the director of a company called the Literary Consultancy and the founder of a charity called the Rebecca Swift Foundation. And when I was 15, I did work experience at Eastside. So when I was 15 years old, I was quite a precocious kid, and my friend at school had been part of a writing competition that Eastside had held. I looked them up, I thought they looked very cool, and I decided to write a letter to the co-directors, Chris and Raki, at the time. And they responded. And even though they'd never had a work experience person before, they agreed to take me on for a week. And that's where everything started for me. By the time I came back and trained as a facilitator, which I did after I'd done my month-long paid internship in the offices, Eastside had already grown significantly. So they were in this lovely office here in Hackney, and they were working with schools. The Arts Awards had really developed and grown. All of their programs had grown. They were working with lots more companies. So it had evolved. And I felt like I was ready to really learn about the world of work. What does I've always been interested in literature and campaigns and social activism. I just couldn't connect the dots. So coming back to work for Eastside was a really good first step in thinking, now what are my actual employment opportunities and where do my values align with my interests, align with my skills and competencies?
So my name is Jacob Sam-LaRose. I am primarily a poet. As a poet, there are many different things that I do. I'm also an artistic director. I'm an editor. I'm an educator. I like to condense it down to basically just saying I travel around the world writing poems, performing poems, and helping other people to write and perform poems. I create spaces for people to do the kind of work that I think is important in the world. So in terms of the kind of timeline of my work with Eastside, it would start with a project like Power and a Voice, which was a collaboration with the British Council that worked with facilitators from different African countries and young people in the UK. We kind of shared some thinking with some of those facilitators, but we also ran workshops over here in the UK. And we had a stage that brought all of those young people together, and some of the invited artists came over as well. And we had a fantastic celebration at the end of the project. And that was a wonderful, wonderful experience. Again, that kind of international exchange, absolutely amazing.
The Translation Nation project, which was also known as the Translingual Express, I think it had two different names while I was working on it or afterwards, was a project to do with incorporating pupils' first languages in how we teach them, into kind of pedagogical methodology. And I was really interested in that because I grew up in a household where I spoke German first. My mum was Japanese. So we had several different languages. I also went to school in a kind of 70% South Asian school. So I was really interested in how we teach kids whilst honouring the fact that lots of them have English as a second, third, sometimes even fourth language. So Translation Nation was a toolkit to think about how you do that.
Well, Chris and Raki have left behind an incredible heritage. I mean, they have 2 Guinness World Records that they've achieved. They've achieved the Queen's Voluntary Service Award, any number of kind of certificates, accreditations, the relationship with the Arts Council. So, they have achieved an immense amount. I really can't state how much my predecessors achieved. So I think it is very exciting and very important to look back at the heritage of an organisation, because you can learn something, and you can learn something deeply from what was achieved, but also what you need to achieve going forwards. So another thing is that there's so many people who have been influenced, encouraged, supported, connected to Eastside over the last 30 years that I really was curious to find out where those people were now. And did they remember their Eastside journey? What impact did it have on their lives? Because all too often, when you work in the world of arts and projects for young people or projects for communities, you're asked to produce an evaluation. And that evaluation is often something that's based on 2 or 3 months worth of work and then what people have to say 5 minutes after you finish. So I was really interested in what people had to say 20 years after their project, or 30 years after their project, or 5 years after the project, because I think you can do a deeper kind of learning with that information.
I love Eastside's commitment to placing poetry in education. There are a few organizations around the country doing work like this, but Eastside, we're talking about a 30th anniversary, right? Eastside has a history of doing this kind of work, and I celebrate that. I celebrate the ethos that Eastside works with. I celebrate the thinking that goes into these kinds of programs. So I've got to sit down and work with a number of different members of staff over the years in terms of how it is that these projects and programs are put together, and the attention to detail, the attention to all of the various different beneficiaries. Again, the students and the participants, but also the teachers. Even the thinking that kind of extends to the parents that in some way might be impacted by the work that's done with the students and that's done through the teachers. The poets themselves, how they benefit from the training. All of these various different parts that are considered. I celebrate that work that Eastside does to the help.
So equal access to the arts is essential for young people. Unfortunately, so many other things in education, science, maths, English always seem to come top, but arts in education, for me, it opened the door. And I know for a fact, so many students I've taught and so many students I've worked with, it can be that one after school club. That is the moment, that is the ignition of the flame, of the love, of the interest, and that can spark a whole future, and if they're not getting that, if those doors are closed, it just should be there. It's essential. Honestly, like I say, it was a huge stepping stone in my life and in my career. I'm going to get emotional. No, I'm not. And honestly, it really did change my life. Oh God, I'm getting emotional. Yeah, so just a huge thanks to Eastside.